This is an AMI podcast.
The world would be a different place if Adam was allergic to apples. Welcome to AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we chat all things audiobooks. I'm your host, Ramia Amuddin, and I'm here with Nisreen Abdelmajid. We've followed the long weekend of Labor Day, which is why I picked this quote, because I had a candy apple, and candy apples are a total childhood reminder for me, and as an adult, having them was just super nostalgic. So this quote about apples, but you know, candy apples in my head, is by Marin Godmenko. And anybody candy apple? Because I'll take one. Let's take a look at the CELA homepage for our featured titles. We got some brand new titles this week at the CELA homepage, the Center for Equitable Library Access at celalibrary.ca. Asphalt Prophecy by Pita C.U.'s Lore, and this is an adventure story. We also have The Queer Evangelist by Sherry DeNovo, and this is an LGBTQ plus biography, so we'll chat about that in a couple of weeks. Twice a Quinceanera by Dalmel Saad Mendez, and this is a contemporary romance, and that's it for the three books we have up there. Nisreen, I want to toss it over to you because we have some audiobook news that we want to definitely highlight.
Yeah, so authors and publishers organizations are calling on the new UK Prime Minister, Liz Truss, to abolish the last remaining tax on reading, ensure schools have funding for author visits, and invest in libraries. According to The Guardian, with the cost of living crisis taking hold, the publishing industry hopes Truss and her government will bring in a range of measures to ensure people from all backgrounds are able to access books easily. And Ramya, I'm thinking that libraries should be on the top of the agenda because, and I know a lot of people would disagree with this thought because now, you know, open access to the internet, not a lot of people go into the library, but some don't have access to that at home or anywhere else. So it should be accessible all year round. And that's why I think they should, you know, build more libraries. And I know that publishers and authors are working on that. So never know.
You never know. And, you know, this is a huge, huge thing to think about, that it's making waves, right? Like it's making waves in news right now. And that the newly appointed prime minister is saying, hey, this is top of mind and we do want to eliminate any barriers to reading, period. And of course, you know, audiobooks and ebooks are the first things that we think about because as part of the disability community, we're always exposed to these alternate means of reading, quote unquote. But yeah, like you said, you know, you might not be going to the library physically all the time because in your own situation, that's not necessarily a need, a necessity for you, but that's not the case for everybody else out there. And if we were to really dig deep into still the amount of challenges that people face with reading, just literacy, access, you know, people who have to travel to get access to anything, education, et cetera, we really do underestimate the values that libraries still hold today in 2022.
A lot of people don't think about how many barriers there are when it comes to reading and literacy, which is insane because I never even thought about that until now.
Exactly.
I never thought about that until I started getting into books in general. And there are so many things that we can break those barriers. So I'm hoping that they can push forward with Liz Truss and the new government can make that change and make it better.
For sure, Nisreen. And that's the thing, right? Like we always look up to our leaders. We always look to our governments and say, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you doing? What's part of your agenda? Does this even show up for you? So the fact that it's one of the first things mentioned at all is really promising and encouraging. And I hope, fingers crossed, that it comes to fruition, that the tax is taken off and that reading in libraries are shone a light on. This is AMI Audiobook Review, the podcast where we chat all things audiobooks. And once a month, we check in with our friend and contributor, Sara Hillis. And she's back with another Know Your Narrator segment. So this is where we highlight some notable voices behind our favorite audiobook listens. And really, they're in front of the microphones, but we don't always get to know who they are, what they do, how they got here. So it's very exciting for us to go through this once a month with you, Sara. We got a good one today.
Yeah, it's really cool. This was a listener / contributor suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Amr,
he was-
is that how we?
Yes, Amr suggested this
Amr.
one, but
And-
it's a popular name, yeah?
It's very popular. I have several people that said, "Would you do Scott Brick? Would you do Scott Brick?" So that's what we're doing. We're doing Scott Brick. I mean, far be it from me to deny what the people want, right? So
Give us what we want. Okay, awesome. And I'm really looking forward to chatting all about Scott Brick. But before that, I'm throwing you right in here. Are you reading anything good right now?
I am. I'm reading a really good book by Emma Donoghue. She's an Irish writer, but she lives in London, Ontario. And this is a book. She writes all kinds of stuff. She wrote Room. If you've ever seen the movie, she wrote Room, and she's written a lot about Ireland. And this time, she wrote a book about the 7th century in Ireland and some Celtic monks that go out on a voyage to find, a place to have a monastery that's free from all the intrigues of modern quote unquote life from that time. And they're going to find this island called Skellig Michael, which is a real place. And now there's puffins that roost there, but it was a monastery way back in the day. So it's a great book. It's read I forget is it Aidan Kelly, I think his name is. It's a really nice narrator, and it's really good.
Okay, and this is not your first Emma Donoghue book, so...
No.
Yeah, okay. So, super fan recommendation. There you go. Okay, awesome. So, as you said, going back to Know Your Narrator, it was a listener request by Amr Khan, who joins us at the end of the month, by the way, so check him out later this month. But a big listener fan. Are you a fan personally?
I am. I've only heard a few of Scott Brick's books, but I've loved what I've heard for several years now. So,
all right. So, what do we want to know about him?
Well, he was born in Santa Barbara, California, in 1956. He went to UCLA and studied acting and writing, and he's done both throughout his life. Writing a lot for sci-fi magazines, fantasy magazines. Because he's a total geek about all that stuff. He just loves everything to do with sci-fi and fantasy. And he also writes screenplays, and so he writes for professional kind of magazines as well about how to be a screenplay writer sort of guy. And he's acted in Shakespeare, of course. They all seem to act in Shakespeare. He acted for 10 years with the Will and Company in LA, or based in LA, and did a bunch of different roles, including he was in the play Cyrano de Bergerac. I think he actually played Cyrano. He was in Hamlet, and he was in Macbeth. And this is not verified. I don't know if I've verified it properly, but he actually has been listed somewhere online, I found, as a fight choreographer for movies and stuff like that. So he deals with sword fighting and all that kind of stuff. And and apparently he was in Robin Hood Men in Tights and a couple of the sword fighting scenes.
Just an extra
it's not
potential tidbit.
Yeah. So he started narrating in 1999, and by 2004, so 5 years, and he started in the middle of 1999, so 4.5 years, he is named one of Audiophile Magazine's Golden Voices.
Oh.
He's already gotten a few awards by this point. It was a really sort of meteoric rise in the audio narration world for him, especially. I think it was the timing too, because audiobooks were getting more airplay, as it were, because of the internet starting up, and you didn't have to just order things on CD all the time and that kind of thing.
That's a really good point, because yeah, like now, you Google audiobooks and it's just everywhere. Not a lot of us are going, what? What are those? But it's definitely not the case in the late 90s, early 2000s. And yet, 4.5 years into, like, from the start of his career, he was booming as a narrator. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, everybody wanted him. Audible has named him their most prolific narrator because with various companies, he's narrated over 800 books in 23 years.
Whoa. What does that even
800.
look like?
I don't even know. It's crazy.
So, okay. And he was writing too, which is another part we can get into. But anything else in the beginning of his career that was pretty good stepping stone or leaping off point for him?
Yeah, as he walked in 1999 to Dove Audio to do an audition, this was his first audition for narration,
Mm-hmm.
he met a guy called Dan Musselman who was leaving Dove Audio to go to Penguin Audio, which is now Penguin Random House. And Dan said, "Here, have my card. If you want some work, we're going to be looking for some narrators soon, so give us a call." And Scott has now narrated over 60%. He thinks of his narrations have been for Penguin/Penguin Random House because of this Dan Musselman
Wow.
guy, and he absolutely, like, he's so grateful to this guy. He's not an arrogant person at all. He's just like, look, this guy helped me get a career in this profession. It's so great to see how grateful he just is for everything that he has.
That's fantastic to see in anybody, right? Like people blooming in any kind of career, even, way down the line, then they're just killing it out there and hustling for their money and all of this stuff, but they're still, they remember how they got there and they remember the people. I love hearing those kind of stories, especially like firsthand in interviews and such when people say, yeah, this was the moment that helped me all these years later.
Yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great. There was a good interview on Behind the Mic, the Audiophile magazine podcast in 2019 that I got. And it's just great to hear him just talk about his career and stuff because it's been really interesting. At one point, he's actually started his own audio studio because there was a book series called The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant by Stephen R. Donaldson that Penguin wanted, I think it was Penguin, wanted to do from book 7 onward because those were the books that were starting to kind of take off,
Okay.
like the people that love these books loved them, right? But they were more cult followings, I guess, for a while.
Uh-huh.
But Penguin had no interest in doing the first 6 books.
Seriously?
Because they're like passé, which is silly because it's a series,
It's a
right?
series.
But so Scott said, "Well, can I get the rights? I'm going to try to get the rights." They're like, "Well, sure, start your own. If you want to do that, go ahead. We don't care because we're not going to do it." So there's only one book that's not narrated by him apparently, and that's because Penguin was doing the last 4 books, and so they went with another narrator for book 9, which I thought is silly, but
Oh, at least we know who to blame. Penguin.
But he did this just because he'd read the first 6 books in college and that kind of thing, and he was like, we have to have these in audio too. Like, he just loves books.
Exactly.
Absolutely. He's a reader's narrator. He's a writer's narrator. He just reads so much.
Wow.
And all kinds of stuff too. Like whether he's narrating or reading it himself, like for pleasure. It doesn't even matter. He just loves a well-told tale.
Well, it's amazing to see the different angles that help him in his career, but also, just make him that much of a better narrator because of his love for books, as you're pointing out, where he's like, can I please take these on myself? And then also the writing aspect of it. So he's kind of covering all parts of the field.
Oh yeah. He's he's just doing everything. I mean, he has written a novel. I can't seem to find it anywhere, so I guess it hasn't been actually published. But we do wonder. It's called Insight, oddly enough. So yeah, he hit it in plain insight or something. But he's the speculation is, like, will he narrate his own novel? One doesn't know.
Uh-huh. Isn't there a movie he was kind of involved in that didn't come out either?
Yeah, I think it's still, oddly enough, in the works for 20 years, but he was hired in 2000 by Morgan Freeman and Revelations Entertainment to help adapt Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama for the big screen. And I think I would have heard of it if it was out.
No kidding.
I like Arthur C. Clarke, so.
Okay, so we're waiting. We're waiting on 2 Scott Brick projects. Scott, let us know where it at.
Yeah, exactly.
So when did he start writing? Like, is this kind of publicized? Was he always into the writing aspect as well?
I think he just started writing throughout his acting career and stuff, in the 80s and 90s for all these magazines and that kind of thing. Toy Fair, Wizard, so that very sort of comic con, sci-fi, fantasy stuff. I haven't read any of his articles, unfortunately, but I'm sure there's book reviews. I'm sure who knows what there is. Like, he might have written short stories. I don't know. I honestly haven't read that part of his life much, but he's obviously prolific and doesn't stop ever.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about what he's really, really known for now, in terms of, what he narrates, because it seems like he was doing a lot of sci-fi writing in the younger days. And then his Shakespearean background, like you said, it reminds me of all the other narrators we've featured so far with all their Shakespearean background and acting and theater. And so now what kind of narration is he doing?
Well, there's a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, 800 books.
He's narrated things like Mystic River by Dennis Lehane. People really, really cottoned onto that one. He's involved in much of the Dune series in various ways, in various different productions, because he loves Frank Herbert and the Dune the Dune universe. He's narrated several, action adventure type stuff. Last week I read In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, which is a sort of major, amazing sort of true crime nonfiction novel type book. It's a strange book, and someone told a story to Scott that she's working on the Hillary Clinton campaign. She's running through the different states, and in every state she wanted to read a thematic audiobook. So when she's in Kansas, which is where this home invasion and gruesome murder took place in the 50s, she started reading this book, and she was at a gas station really late at night, and I guess she was listening to Scott, and she thought she could see the house in the distance, and she was so freaked out she couldn't get out of the car for 20 minutes. And Scott
awesome.
Brick sort of said in the interview, well, I think it was her imagination, but really he's a very atmospheric narrator, and yet subtle too, like really cool stuff.
I mean, if you can help paint a picture, I can barely go through stairwells just listening to any scary audiobook, It by Stephen King. Oh gosh. I couldn't go through stairwells for months, man. Mostly because that book was so long, it lasted me months. But anyway.
I know.
But
it's a great audio production, though, that one.
I know, it really is. But absolutely, you're talking atmospheric, and I immediately think the hardware that we use to listen to audiobooks as well. If you got some good headphones going with the nice production value that you get from audiobooks these days, even if it's just straight narration, that can really make an audiobook feel chilling.
Yeah. And what I like about Scott is that he pauses sometimes, and some people get frustrated when narrators pause. They just want to speed it up and get the story going, do the digital speed up thing that we have now, which I've never understood.
The old me, Sarah.
I'm not that sort of person.
Okay.
Just can't do it, but because someone's talking to me and I want to hear them talk. And so he says, sometimes pausing, the silence is as important as the words, because it's giving you the idea of how someone's avoiding confronting an issue, or that kind of thing, right? So
wow. That is very, very powerful. And hearing that from a narrator, not just coming to that, ourselves or our perspectives of it, but hearing why he does what he does. Because it could be, an easy note from an editor to be like, you got to speed it up, right? don't take out all the pauses. And he says, no, they're deliberate, and this is why. That's the theater side of it coming through, and the storyteller side too.
Yeah, and he's also paying it forward. He's won all these earphone awards from Audiophile magazine of 60 over 60, I believe.
Yeah.
5 Audio awards. He's been inducted in 2018 into the Audible Narrators Hall of Fame. I keep messing that up. It's Narrators Hall of Fame. And that's who started this Narrators Hall of Fame, is Audible, and they started it in 2017. So now we know that.
There you go.
So he's one of the second group to be inducted, and he teaches narration. He has resources on his website for people that want to get into narration, and he's writing a book about it too, like an instructional kind of how to start narrating.
Wow.
So he's paying it forward too, which is really great.
This is awesome. And I want to get into some quick things before we got to let you go, Sarah. He really puts a lot of effort into his reading, no? Like the materials that he's about to read or prepping to read, or
He does, yeah. He looks up pronunciations. He talks to authors when he can. One time he read a book that was really meaningful to him while he was going through cancer treatment, and
wow.
it was it was behind schedule and everything, but the company didn't say, well, we can't use you anymore. They just worked with him. They loved him that much that they were willing to just get behind him during this horrible time. And he'd fall asleep at the studio, that kind of thing, because of the chemo and stuff, and they just kept going though, and they kept helping him, and he was really grateful for that too.
That would be something that, it feels like probably the most memorable part of your career, right? Like you're so far down the line, you've done so much, and you're probably even wondering if it's something that you can continue doing. Well, that's what I would have wondered. And then to have the company back you up that way is wonderful. Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
And then we're referring to him as the readers and writers narrator. Why is that?
Well, he really believes in helping the reader to go through a story the way that an author does. So like in a mystery story, for example, there's always the person that everybody thinks was the murderer, right?
Mm-hmm.
The most horrible person in the world. That one had to be the murderer, right? And of course, it's never true. And so Scott, tries to really play up this murderer character, this obvious murderer character, making him totally unlikable, totally like he had to have done it. And then the real killer's just sitting there in the background, kind of going. And then he just pops up, and it's like, oh, it's that person. Oh my gosh, So he really tries to bring the reader along the way an author would if you were reading the story.
That's amazing.
He feels that. Yeah, he feels really strongly about that.
That's amazing. The voice in my head would never be able to do it that way. If I was reading, let's say, the synthetic audio.
No.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's just as suspicious as everybody else. And he started his own studio.
He did in 2007, Brick by Brick Audio, and again, because of Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, but he's done several things with it going forward. But he still works for commercial, like for big companies too.
That's amazing. I really appreciate this conversation because, and this is where we started the segment, right? Like to get to know the narrator, and not just because you love them as they're reading, but this is like a solid example of someone who dedicates so much of their time, their effort, their capability, and their heart and soul into what they do. And they're probably making the big bucks, but it's really worth it for them because they're doing it with so much love and care.
Well, I would say if he's making big bucks, it's because he's doing 700 things at once.
I know, right? That's amazing. Well, I mean, first of all, good on you for doing so much research into this individual, because I feel like we can appreciate him way more now. And as we go through the list of 800 audiobooks that he's
Yeah.
Amazing, Sarah. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to see who we have on the docket for October, and we'll chat with you then.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. Sara Hillis joining us once a month near the start of the month to give us a Know Your Narrator segment. And that's a wrap for AMI Audiobook Review for this week. I'm your host, Ramya Amuddin. And until next time, happy audiobook listening.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.